Talk shoes. Recorded live.
Yes, and welcome to the Castle Dracula Horror Movie Podcast. On this podcast, and we are thrilled to be back, we talk about horror movies, vampire movies, and all-around awesomeness. And this week, we continue our musical horror retrospective with the, how to put this, the 1975 movie adaptation of Richard O'Brien's West End hit The Rocky Horror Show, here called The Rocky Horror Picture Show, directed by Jim Sharman. Scroll that. It's the Rocky Horror Picture Show. We were talking about Rocky Horror. It's kind of absurd, by the way, I know, to introduce Rocky Horror as if we've never heard of it. We are a podcast dedicated to cult movies, and this is, as Drew was pointing out, the original cult movie. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's film, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have, so warning, spoilers ahead. I'm your host, Jason Henderson, author of the Alex Van Helsing adventure Triumph of Death in hardback, an ebook from HarperCollins. With me are Drew Edwards, the creator of the long-running horror webcomic Halloween Man, which you can find at HalloweenMan.com. Say hello, Drew.
Howdy.
Howdy. Special guest, Jamie Barr, musician, pinup model, educator, and lead vocalist and upright bassist for Austin's premier all-female rock and roll band Danger Cakes, which you can find info about their new album, Dessert First, from Deep Eddy Records at dangercakes.net. That was a mouthful. Jamie, say hello.
Hello.
Hello, and welcome back. I think the last time we talked to you was Carrie, or actually, no, you were...
Nightmare Before Christmas.
Nightmare Before Christmas. That was when I was on my Christmas sabbatical. Okay, and as always, color commentary from attorney and host of the mom podcast called Pod Moms, Julia Guzman. Say hello.
Hello.
Hello. Okay. The Rocky Horror Picture Show is a parody tribute to the classic science fiction and horror movie B-movies. It introduces Tim Curry and features Susan Sarandon and Barry Bostwick, along with cast members from the original London 1973 production. I mean, look who was cast who's still here in this movie. Meatloaf, Little Nell, Patricia Quinn, Richard O'Brien, who wrote the dang thing, Jonathan Adams as Dr. Scott, and still in limited release nearly 38 years after its premiere. It has the longest-running theatrical release in film history. Rocky Horror Picture Show gained notoriety as a midnight movie in 1977 when audiences began participating with the film in theaters. It is the first major film from a major studio to be in the midnight movie market. It essentially invented the movie market. All of this is from Wikipedia and other sources. I'm going to stop explaining this movie so that we can skip right, because you've all heard of it. Let's skip right to First Impressions, Rocky Horror Picture Show, and then we'll get into what darkens my brow about Rocky Horror and what I'm worried about. So let's go, Drew and Julia and Jamie and then Jason. Drew, First Impressions, Rocky Horror.
First Impressions is such a loaded question with this movie because I've seen it literally a gazillion times.
Really?
Probably. I would gamble to say I've seen this movie possibly more than any other movie that I've ever seen, which isn't to say that it's my favorite movie ever made, but it is a movie I get a lot of enjoyment out of. I think the music is there's a lot of great songs in here. I think, honestly, it's great that we're following Little Shop of Horrors with this because I feel like the music in this movie complements the music in that movie very well. I've also had a long-standing theory that you can kind of get to know that the Rocky Horror is somewhat of a musical Rorschach test. You can kind of tell a little bit about somebody by which character they gravitate to. By the way, Eddie. Anyway, I like this movie a lot. So much so that again, I've seen it a gazillion times. As for what I can add into a discussion about a movie that's literally been discussed,
we're going to find new things to discuss about it.
All right. Well, thumbs
all
up.
Right. Julia, First Impressions, Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Well, I don't remember my first impressions because they were like a million years ago. Literally. No. But I do, I am appreciative that we're doing it because I was the one who requested it because I just thought it would be really fun to watch it again and actually watch it. Because, I mean, the thing is, whenever I watched it, as you know, in high school and college, it was as a participant and not as a viewer, as a spectator.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting to watch it without, and I couldn't not participate. I mean, I couldn't help but say the things that I knew to say, But I mean, to not be screaming and throwing things and standing up and doing dancing and all that. That was an interesting experience. So I'd say that as a film, it definitely has. It's so different from anything else. So it's definitely worth seeing, even if you're not participating. But without the theater experience and without the whole, the experience period of Rocky Horror, I don't think it's near. I mean, I think that the experience of going in the theater at the midnight show is half of the quality. Half of what makes it great.
Wow. Okay. So you're gonna speak up for the experience a little bit. We're all gonna use the word literally a lot. Jamie, what are your first impressions? First impressions of Rocky Horror.
Let's see, was when I was a teenager, and I remember getting quite an eyeful and being very shocked and surprised because I think I grew up much in the vein of Janet.
Oh, yeah.
Like I said, I grew up in a very, Catholic, Irish Catholic influenced, household, and so this was basically sex ed for me. But yeah, that was so. I don't think I'd ever even heard of a transvestite before. I remember being like, "What exactly is that?" And that's saying something. But it was on. I think it was on Showtime, and or Cinemax, what I always like to call Cinemax. And that's it kind of showed a different light of sexuality that I had never even thought of before. It was just kind of funny, and I don't know. I enjoyed. I actually never have seen it at a live shadowcast or the theatrical version. I always have wanted to, but it seems to have never worked out. But I always have a soft spot for this movie because, like I said, it was kind of something that awakened, like, wow, this other world than chocolate
really
or vanilla.
So you've only experienced it as a raunchy movie musical that you've caught on cable. So you've never done the live.
He is a virgin.
Wow, that's fascinating.
And Rocky Horror terminology.
So you're truly, to use Rocky Horror terminology, she's a virgin. That is truly amazing. I mean, I was sitting here trying to imagine.
Be gentle with me.
Well, I was trying, and you're the performer among us. I mean, that's so. I was trying to figure out. I mean, Julia, you haven't been out there in a band in a while. I know you're interested in getting back out there, but I said that because I didn't want to leave you out of. But
it's okay. I'm not offended that you don't consider me a performer compared with someone who's actually in a band and has released albums.
I used to actually harass Julia's band.
It's fine.
It's a long time ago, but I did. But I was trying to figure out, what it would be like to be somebody who had never actually been to a midnight performance of Rocky Horror Picture Show. And I was thinking, well, where in the world will we find such a specimen? That just won't happen in the wild.
And you wouldn't even have guessed it. One was already on your show.
And there's still, I picked up the paper this weekend. It's showing at the Inwood in Dallas at midnight. So it hasn't gone away. All right, for me, I've had a complicated relationship with Rocky Horror Picture Show because I didn't start attending the midnight performances until, I was in high school, which made total sense. And by that point, Rocky Horror came out in 1975, and I was in high school 10 or 12 years after that, from like 85 to 89. So Rocky was in full swing, and I went several times in high school, but the main context for me with Rocky Horror was listening to the original cast recording, because when I was driving around with people in high school, we had Rocky Horror in constant rotation with sort of other stuff. It was in with Camelot and Chorus Line and 42nd Street and Bat Out of Hell and a bunch of other stuff. So it was the cast recording, and yes, Don't even get me started on what kind of friends I was hanging out with. You know, I was running with a wild crowd that was spinning 42nd Street. And but
wow, God, that Camelot going.
it's truly sad, but truly true. Anyway, we so I, you know, for me this was a musical that I was aware of, and then you'd go out to the experience, and the experience was something else. The experience was almost as though it could have been almost any movie, except for that, you know, where, you know, people have learned to recite lines to it, except for that's not completely the case because Rocky Horror Picture Show is a very strange movie. So let's get straight into that, in fact. So but that's my point. I come to this as a fan of the picture, and you know, and as a fan of the music, and I want to figure out right off the bat, does it make sense, bearing in mind that Jamie has only seen it this way, where you watch it on a TV screen? Does it make sense to watch Rocky Horror like this? In other words, are we doing this movie some kind of disservice? You know, because we watched Horror of Dracula, and Horror of Dracula doesn't have lines that you throw back at it. There's, you know, I think what I'm saying is, are we being disrespectful to the Rocky Horror Picture Show to always seem to watch it in this means that makes fun of it? Anybody want to venture?
I don't think they're actually making fun of it.
Tell me more. So you think there is a love for Richard O'Brien?
Absolutely. What is it when you go to a live viewing of the Rocky Horror Picture Show? What do you feel if not love? That's
true. There is a great, you know, but here's the thing. You have, like, we open up with the lips at the beginning of Rocky Horror Picture Show, and you know, and by the way, at the end of this, I want to hear everybody's favorite song, but we open up in Rocky Horror Picture Show with the lips, and the lips begin singing the song Science Fiction Double Feature by Richard O'Brien. And Richard O'Brien sings it, in fact. This is the guy who plays Riff. And that song is so, you know, it gives away so much about how much this guy knows about monster movies and science fiction movies and all that groovy stuff. And also how sort of wackadoo his I shouldn't even say that. How deviant his sexuality is from your sort of everyday vanilla sexuality. And Richard O'Brien would be the first person to say that about himself. And that's really kind of cool. And what I worry about is that the notion of shouting lines back and forth to it, you miss out on the lyrics. You miss out on how interesting some of these compositions are. But you know,
yeah,
again,
but the thing is, this movie would not have survived were it not for the audience participation, the whole cult aspect of it. I mean, nobody would have ever seen it beyond 1975 if it hadn't been for the fact that people latched on and started doing this.
Yeah, it would have been this
weird
thematic oddity.
Yeah, you can't do a disservice to a film by making it survive, basically, when it wouldn't have otherwise.
Wow, what an interesting thought. Yeah, that's basically somehow this is the way that Rocky Horror Picture Show bought its immortality. Because you're right, there's countless, you know, At Long Last Love came out around 1975. It's not like people are digging that up. You know,
yeah, and it's not an Oscar winner, so it's not like you're going to pull it up every time you're looking at, you know, Oscar-winning films.
Well, in fact, it's worth remembering that Rocky Horror Picture Show did very poorly at the box office initially. This was a big hit on the stage. I mean, it was huge, but it was a cult hit. It opened up first in like a little place that seated 60 people, 60, you know, so that you'd have this really intimate space. So this was a truly punk rock show, you know, where people were you'd be right up there next to the performers, and then it got bigger, and it went to the West End, and it got bigger, and then they brought it to Hollywood. And by the way, at this point, Meatloaf has joined the cast, and I never think of Meatloaf in the context of being a performer who's jetting back and forth across the Atlantic because he's playing he's playing Eddie both in the United States and in England.
It looks like we may have lost Drew, according to the chat room.
Okay. Well, if you lost Drew, I'm sure he'll come back. Jamie, do we still have Jamie?
Yes, you do.
We've lost poor Drew.
By the way,
okay.
I forgot to say earlier, you guys were all talking about who you identified with. I was identified with Magenta only because my hair was like Magenta.
Oh.
Not red.
You just needed a good deep conditioner. No.
Yeah, right. It wasn't red, but it was giant and frizzy. And plus I was very, at the time when I was watching it, I was very sarcastic and bitter and dark. So I think that was, but although I have to say, Jamie, that my upbringing was very Janet-esque like yours was. But by the time I was watching it, I was rejecting that whole, side of myself and going, I'm wild, even though I was not really remotely wild.
Well,
I wanted to be.
I was a virgin when I first saw this movie, and I know you guys called me a virgin earlier for not seeing it, theatrically, but I mean, like, I was, like, wholeheartedly virgin, and I was just, amazed. Like I said, I had never, ever seen anything like that. I didn't see my first rated R movie until I was actually 16, and that was when I snuck in to see the movie Go before and had bought tickets with all my friends to go see Never Been Kissed.
Wow.
Go? Yeah. So,
that's hilarious.
Like, this is the same year that I saw my first rated R movie. Was I go from Disney to Rocky Horror Picture Show.
But the crazy, that's what's interesting to me, is the crazy sort of deviance of Rocky Horror, because you have we're going to get to the characters in just a second, in fact, but you have Frank, who is this transvestite, and he's a very sort of muscular, in your face, really enjoyable transvestite. He's having a really great time with it. And, all these characters are so strange, and there's so much like there's so many sexual peccadillos on display. It's really exotic. I mean, it's almost to the point where it moves all the way over into being kind of a late night joke. And I think that's almost a way that a young person can be introduced to a lot of this stuff in a pretty kind of safe way. In other words, the deviance of Rocky Horror Picture Show is so much fun and so out there that I find it a lot less threatening than, I don't know, it doesn't feel pornographic. It feels in a strange way actually pretty gentle, although, some of the songs are really quite dark. I mean, Superheroes at the end is an extremely broody little song.
I remember my mom walking in the room when I had it on. Cause once I saw it for the first time, it was like on all the time, of course. And my mom walked into the room, and she was like, "What are you watching?"
Right.
And she didn't know what it was, and it's kind of funny that she didn't realize at that point, because it obviously had been out for almost 20 years at this point. And when I said, I was like, "Oh, Mom, it's okay, it's a musical," and she was like, "Oh, okay." That's how it was in my family, because I was a theater dork. So, I got away with cabaret because of that, too. So
that is really
I doubt that my parents know what Rocky Horror is now. I mean, it's just not something that would have, ever penetrated their psyche. I mean, why would
my parents were well aware of Rocky Horror. I mean, because they were both class of '69, so this was coming out, in their early 20s. You couldn't escape this particular movie. So I remember asking my dad, probably, I don't know, when I was 11 or 12, I was like, "What's Rocky Horror?" And he goes, "Oh, I mean, I can't remember, but he explained it fairly well. But it was very sort of very lackadaisical. It was like, how it's about this transvestite from outer space. I mean, which what in the world? It sounds like a David Bowie movie if you say it that way. You go, oh, okay, it's The Man Who Fell to Earth, only with cross-dressing. So all right,
Labyrinth now.
Let's be fair. The Rocky Horror Picture Show is 1,000 times more entertaining than The Man Who Fell to Earth.
Well, and that might actually prove the point that Rocky has to be the way it is to survive as long as it does. I think there are really great songs here too. But before we get to the songs, I want to get to some of these performances. Starting with Tim Curry. Okay, so what happens is, but very briefly, just for those who want to be reminded, we can pretend you both have and haven't seen the movie. Brad and Janet are a couple of clean-cut kids from a place called Denton, wherever the heck that is. It is not Dallas, Denton. It's in North Texas. It is some imaginary but very American Denton. Remember, though, being written by British writer-singer Richard O'Brien, who was obsessed with American film. So he comes up with college lovebirds Brad and Janet, who go to a wedding and are celebrating their own engagement and go out for a long drive and wind up meeting. They wind up at this creepy castle, and they meet after a lot of sort of weird things. They see some of the early songs, and they meet Frank and Furter. And Frank in Furter is Tim Curry, and he is the central point of the entire film. He is, how best to put this? He is a tall, very muscular, fairly lean British man with, really awesome curly hair, not unlike Julius, actually, but and he wears, what is that thing he's wearing? A bodice, I suppose.
And Teddy.
Yeah, he's wearing sort of a Teddy sort of thing, and panties and these high-heeled boots, sort of Gene Simmons-y sort of boots, and he has some awesome tattoos. He has one on his hip and one on his shoulder, and he does not look like a woman. Frankenfurter is the mad scientist, and he looks like a sort of beautiful man in women's clothing. And his song, as he introduced himself, is this quote-unquote sweet transvestite from transsexual Transylvania. He is so gender crazy that it is an amazing performance. And what do you guys, especially you, the virgin who was watching this, what did you make of Tim Curry in this role?
Well, Jamie's actually having to log back in.
Oh no! I called on Jamie just because she got cut off.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear anything you just said.
He wants to know what you think about Tim Curry as Frankenfurter.
Yes.
I can't imagine anyone else ever being Frankfurter, and everyone who tries is just.
And I want to say that in the trivia part of the IMDb for this, it says that Mick Jagger wanted to play Frankenfurter. I'm wondering what that would have been like. That would have been really interesting as well.
Well, Jim Sharman, the director really demanded that he get to use the stage cast, and the reason I think that's really good is that there are some bits that Tim Curry does. Like when he meets Brad and Janet and he says, "You both look like you're pretty groovy," he does a take to the camera as he's walking by. He's always being, and he sort of he twists, he curls his lip, and you realize he's played this role at that point. In other words, by the time Tim Curry gets in front of the camera, he's already played this role literally hundreds, maybe 1,000 times. He has been doing this role so much that he has bits, physical, business, eye rolls, tongue curls, lip stuff, things he's going to do with his hands, snarls. Every moment has something that he's tried on audiences over and over and over again. It would have been even. Go ahead.
The interesting thing, and I don't think that Mick Jagger could have pulled this off, and here is why. You brought up him being like muscular, and he's not really trying to look like a woman. The character of Frankenfurter straddles the line of both being effeminate and hyper macho.
Right.
And I don't think anybody else could have pulled that off.
Right. That's right. Yeah. It's a mind-blowing thing because he certainly loves the effeminacy kind of stuff. He has scenes towards the end where he puts on this sort of Joan Collins getup and for the song "I'm Going Home" and everything, and he digs that stuff. It's just a very interesting role, the audience has got to check out. If anybody listening to this hasn't seen it, if you go to YouTube, there are a couple of interviews with Tim Curry from around the period, and one is from this TV show in Britain in like 1976 when he was just basically touring the movie, and he's out of character, and he's very normal. Like his hair is parted in the middle, and he's got this plaid shirt on, and he looks so sort of unimpressive and quiet and shy. It's so interesting to see him, and then they keep playing clips from the movie and how sort of out there he is in the performance of Frank. But I mean, if you listen to the cast recording, even his readings for these songs is different, because it's a couple of years between the time he records the cast recording and the time he records the movie recording. And if you've listened to one, you get used to the phrasing, and so then you get thrown off as you're like thinking your way through or even singing your way through the not that I would do that, but the so all right. So that's Frank, who is the plum role. I mean, I totally get why Mick would want to do it, and I'm really glad that they got Tim, but they had to cast this hero and heroine, the mezzo-soprano Janet and the tenor Brad, and they are played by Susan Sarandon and Barry Bostwick. These are two people, honestly, and I mention them together because I don't think we need to spend very much time on Brad and Janet.
So you can't say Brad and Janet without in my head. I immediately go, and this is like we should do the little disclaimer here that there's going to be language because we're talking about Rocky Horror. There's going to be language.
You're talking about Rocky freaking yes.
But I can't hear Brad and Janet without going asshole, slut.
Yes.
Like it's just so trained in my head that that's just how you have to say that after every time you say it.
That's right. And I keep feeling like I need to explain these things to Jamie because she's never gone to a live performance. But if you...
I know they're there. I'm not sure exactly what they are, so I just kind of look and okay.
The thing of it is, some performances are really, really organized, and they'll actually give you a handout with the stuff to shout. Some it doesn't work like that. You just have to go.
And now with the internet, which we didn't have when we were doing this as kids, you can find the guides. Like there's a guide at RockyHorrorFan.com. There's a guide that says, I'm looking at it now. It says throwing. It has an audience props section. It says throwing rule: always throw up and back, never into the aisles at the stage or at the screen, unless you're in the back row. Then throw up and forward. Bubbles, no rice. As with any wedding, when the bride and groom leave the church, blow your bubbles. See, we had rice when we were kids, when we were young, but now it's bubbles. And then
because the ushers objected to the rice being thrown.
Sure, of course. So I'm just saying, there's like all there's a whole. I mean, there's etiquette associated.
Well,
with it.
and the shouting, the interactive part of the Rocky Horror experience, which is where you would go and you might dress in costume. Usually it works. It works like this, and I'll recap it. Even though you guys know, Jamie may or not, but the way it works is this: show starts at midnight. This happened from the very first time they started showing it. Basically, they started showing Rocky at midnight back in '75. After it failed, a couple months later, they booked it in the midnight showings, and they started doing it. And then within about a year, this weird experience had started happening. Show starts at midnight, you show up. You can be in costume or not. Usually a cast has already planned. There'll be the regular guy. You'll run into a guy. He says, no, I'm Frank over at the Inwood, and I'm going to do it for another 6 weeks or so, and then this other guy's going to be Frank. And so you have a small cast, and they're in full costume, and they will often act out the entire show down front on the, below the proscenium underneath the screen. So that will happen. Some shows don't actually have that. Meanwhile, the audience is actually both throwing props, displaying props, and shouting out cued interactive dialogue. So I'm trying to think of something that's even clean enough for a podcast.
Well, I mean, like I said, I do have it, although I just lost the screen. I do have it in front of me. So it's like, for example, right at the beginning, they start out, and it's the science fiction double features playing. And so it says, it told us where where we stand, and everybody says, on our heads, and in a celluloid jam, yay, Smuckers. I mean, this is the kind of stuff. It came from, and everybody's like, where? Outer space. And they're like, thank you. So it's stuff like that where...
Yeah, you're just taking advantage of every...
pauses, and whenever there's pauses in the movie, then there will always be the people yelling a question like, what? And then he'll answer the question and stuff like that. So it's really fun.
It's amazing. And it has a regional flavor because depending on what theater you go to, they'll have developed different interactive dialogue. Now, with the internet, that's probably changing. You'll probably start to see all of that stuff blend together. But so that goes on, and I think it wasn't until about the same time that Jamie watched it for the first time was about the time that I finally saw it for the first time on video and not in amongst that sort of live experience. And a lot of people had joked about this because in Fame, the movie Fame, there's a guy who goes to Rocky and he gets up and yells at everybody to shut up because he's trying to watch the movie, and they yell at him that this is the experience here. This is what we're here for. So that goes on. I don't remember how we got off. Oh, yeah. Well, it was because Brad and Janet, you can't hear about Brad and Janet without wanting to call them an asshole and a slut. And that is just what you do when you're watching it. Every time they mention either of those names, you're supposed to give them those monikers. It can drive you crazy.
It's not every time, but it is like at first for sure.
That's right. But anyway, we meet them and they have this duet. Mainly it's Brad's song where he, Damn It, Janet. And he's chasing her around this church and I think if I recall, he's asked her to marry him. And we meet the rest of the cast of the movie because they're all in disguise. So we meet Richard O'Brien, who's in disguise as a guy that works at the church, and all of them are church people.
And they're recreating the American Gothic painting, whatever that is.
That's right. So, I don't know. What do we want to say? Can we skip to Richard O'Brien or okay, Susan Sarandon, perfectly lovely.
I think we have to talk about Brad and Janet at least a little bit because Brad and Janet are the audience. They're being sucked into this weird world.
Do they bring? So I agree with you, and yes, you're right. We're supposed to be interested in their innocence and their being seduced by the wild, wild world of Frank and Furter when they get to his place. But
and that's a metaphor. I mean, that's a metaphor for everything that tears apart an innocent married couple once they're exposed to the real world. Because like these people are very sheltered and they only know each other, and then they go into this world of sexuality and drugs and all kinds of things going on. And I mean, I think that's a metaphor for what really happens in real life relationships when you have like high school sweethearts or whatever, then they go out into the real world and suddenly it's like, oh, there's not just us, there's like all this other stuff, and I don't know if this is the right thing or what. Like there's all kinds of risks that pull on those relationships once you've kind of been exposed.
Well, that's true. No, I think that I agree with you. I think that is what Brad and Janet are supposed to do for us. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, so I just got finished watching my way through the whole Frankie and Annette series, right? And those movies are terrible. I mean, the performances from Frankie Avalon and Annette Funicello are not going to win any awards, right? Having said that, Frankie and Annette would have brought 300% more believable characterization to this than Barry Bostwick and Susan Sarandon. I cannot believe that Susan Sarandon becomes a fantastic actress.
Well, she's not trying to be believable. It's that same kind of heightened overacting that's in Little Shop of Horrors.
Well, no, that's a good point. That could very well be it. She might be directed, say, hey, this is a broad performance. All you have to do is
absolutely what it was. I mean, Jamie and I just watched a interview with her where she says as much.
Ah, interesting. They're playing kind of cartoon versions of high school students, which is cool. I mean, look, they're both good looking. They're both beautiful. We can spend time with them. We don't feel bad about about being with them. You know, there's no moment where we're watching them and going, get them off the screen. I don't completely agree with the direction here. I kind of wish that I wish that they had some character of their own, but it's okay. We get that their character is that they are innocent, and that they are good. Brad is out to protect Janet, and he's out to figure out
right
a way
down
to
to
get
the tidy whities and the white slip and the white bra.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. So, and in fact, how do they wind up in Frank's universe? They go for a drive. They get in the rain, and when they get broken down, we get probably, to my mind, the best song in the entire show. I love this song. The song that comes next is "There's a Light Over at the Frankenstein Place," and
yeah, I love that song too.
Oh, it's a great song. I mean, it is. It's. I mean, I don't know. It makes reference to this other world. It has. I don't know. I think it's a complicated song, and I really enjoy it. And that's the one that actually brings them to. They follow the light to this castle we've seen before, by the way, because it's Oakley Court, which is where they shot a bunch of the Hammer movies, and I swear we've seen at least one movie in this actual podcast that was shot there. So let's see. They get to what they call the Frankenstein place, just as they're noticing a whole bunch of visitors showing up for the master's party on motorcycles, and they are introduced into the house by the next character that I want to talk about, which is the domestics. Richard O'Brien as Riffraff, Patricia Quinn as Magenta, and Nell Campbell as Little Nell. These are the people who introduce Brad and Janet into the household.
But let me interject that before we meet any of those people, we have Charles Gray, who is kind of this omniscient narrator
I forgot
guy
about him.
off to the side. And he's a big part of the audience participation, because every time you see Charles Gray, and again with the pardon the language to anyone who's out there, everyone always says, "Where's your fucking neck?" Because it's like the way he's positioned, you can't see his neck. So it's a constant gag throughout the entire film. That, like, whenever he says something, then they're like, "Unlike your fucking neck," or whatever. It's like the whole thing. It just goes on and on, and it's just so funny that I just can't not mention that, because it's such a great key part of the experience to me.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Can I say something about Charles Gray real quick?
Please, yeah, go crazy.
I love the fact that he is in this, because other than the castle that you just mentioned, he's another tangible link back to the very movies they are lampooning, because he is in The Devil Rides Out, which is one of my favorite Hammer movies.
Oh, we've got to do The Devil Rides Out. I really love that movie. Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that. He's also Blofeld in Diamonds Are Forever. I mean, Charles Gray, he was also, he was Antonio in a very popular BBC version of Merchant of Venice. I mean, Charles Gray is no slouch. He just happens to be here as the criminologist, a part that he probably recorded in all of 20 minutes one day at Pinewood or wherever they're shooting this thing. And yeah, he plays the criminologist. He is this guy in a criminology office, with a bunch of like strange big books, and weirdly he's got comic books and magazines and maps and magnifying glasses. And he's telling us the story of what happened that day with Brad and Janet. Unclear why. I guess he's telling us it's like a reality show. He's telling us what happened to these crazy kids, on the night that all the events that we're witnessing happened. I don't know if that's supposed to mean that Brad and Janet are dead at the end. I hope not. It looks to me at the end like they may well survive, and we'll get there in a minute. But okay, so yes. He's fantastic. I love Charles Gray. My heart goes out to him. So we get to the house, and the door is opened by Riff Raff. And Riff is an extraordinarily skinny man with stringy blonde hair that's like really receding.
He's hunched over.
And he has a hunch, yes. And he wears this really groovy kind of like gravedigger's costume. I mean, it's a domestic outfit. It's great, and he's the main servant, and he's the one who introduces Brad and Janet to the world to the time warp world of Frankenfurter. He's the one who starts the song. It's astounding, and he's also the guy who wrote the whole show. That's the thing that really amazes me when I watch him, is that all of these songs, all these parts, Damn It Janet, Hopatootie, everything, Frankenstein Place, the whole thing is all out of the head of Riff Raff. We're watching Riff Raff's fever dream, as we watch this film. And it took me years and years and years before I was ever aware of that. So there's Riff, and does anybody have anything that they want to add about Riff Raff?
Well,
and if not, I'll go right on to Magenta. We got these two girls. We got Magenta and Columbia, and they are the sort of sexy, the other domestics. Basically, Frankenfurter, as it appears, he's got an enormous party going on with a whole bunch of guests wearing groovy Elton John shades and tuxedos and differently colored cummerbunds. But he's also got a staff. He's got Riff, and then he's got Magenta and Columbia. Now, in the original description of Columbia, who is played by Little Nell, and she's this really cute lady with short red hair, she was listed as the groupie, whereas Magenta is listed as the maid. But the way they're presented in the movie, they're basically both maids.
Or both groupies.
Yeah, and the difference is that Magenta is very sort of vampiric and clearly has a sort of oddly intimate relationship with Riff, who we also come to understand is her brother, but it's never, but their relationship is not necessarily sexual so much as just sort of sensual. It's really impossible to say.
That's another thing.
Go ahead, please.
Huh?
No, please, go ahead.
On the neck.
Yeah. No, there's definitely, it's especially incestuous. But that's actually something that another thing that the audience always yells at is elbow sex whenever they do their little dance.
Yes.
We're like, elbow sex.
Yeah, they have a bit of choreography where they'll touch fingertips and then they'll come close and their whole arms will sort of roll up until their elbows touch and then back, which is great. Again, these are kissing siblings, so yeah. I mean, and once again, this is O'Brien showing us all kinds of deviant sexuality. This, by the way, is the moment when Sharman, the director, wanted to have a Wizard of Oz-style transition. He really wanted to do this thing where it would be black and white through the whole experience up to now. And then when Tim Curry says, well, you've come on a very special night, you see, and he starts the beginning of the time warp, where he says, it's astounding, time is fleeting, he'd throw open the door to the ballroom, and it would be in color, and that would be this sort of crazy transition to this vibrant, newly sexualized world. And when you think of it that way, if you think of like the gay scene of the 70s as well, that idea of becoming aware of this vibrant world that you didn't know was there, makes a little bit more sense. But they didn't do that. I mean, the studio was not interested in that at all. They thought nobody's going to get that. This is going to be so artsy. And I think that's right. I mean, I don't think I would have stopped and gone, oh yeah, because it's a new world opening up, because it's clearly that. It's obviously a new world. They do the time warp. I think the time warp is the one song that everybody remembers the most when they think of this picture.
Well, and again, part of the audience participation is that you do the dance.
Everybody
and you yell
does
different
the dance.
things. You yell different things. So you do, like it says, put your hands on your hips, and everybody says, or somebody else's, and bring your knees in tight, and it's like, and then do the pelvic thrust. Everybody goes, group sex, group sex, group sex.
Right.
I mean, you just can't not, again, not do it.
No, you're right. The time warp is absolutely what people remember the most about going. And I think if I ask people to list their song. What's that, Jamie?
It's like the song. It's a song that they play at weddings. You know, it's like
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's become so annoying to me. Actually, it's so funny how these sort of midnight showings and art theater kind of stuff have been sort of co-opted so much by the mainstream that really, frankly, Rocky is not that deviant now. I mean, we're not all transvestites. We're not all incestuous, but seeing it in a movie is not. It's not shocking, I don't think, to see it today. Or at least I don't feel like it's all that shocking.
Well, Rocky has become pop culture. You know, the Rocky horror has become part of pop culture. It's become the very thing that it was lampooning. It's become part of the pop culture landscape, and you know that was inevitable. Either it was going to shrivel up and die and just become another B movie, or you know, it's become what it's become, and that's
well, and there's the comments. I can't remember who made it recently. Maybe it was Camille Paglia. I totally don't remember. But they were saying, you know, don't be fooled. I mean, if you're interested in say marriage equality or any number of other issues that might appeal to you if you're interested in gay rights. You know, some of the writers recently I've read have said, don't be fooled. Just because people have mainstreamed Rocky Horror and are interested in watching movies about gay people does not mean that they're taking the full step into recognizing alternate lifestyles as being something real in their own lives. In other words, that is a bridge too far. However, in pop culture terms, these things have become a lot more acceptable.
Right, and I mean, I think it's because it's a caricature. It's like watching somebody, you know, like you remember how the Taco Bell, the Taco Bell dog was like, you can't Taco Bell, and everybody thought it was really funny and everything, but there was a lot of people who were like, that's actually kind of stereotyping. It's like stereotyping Mexican people with this accent and everything. I don't know. I mean, I just
that's
think
a really good point. I mean, there are a lot of guys who object.
You know?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, Julia. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was just saying. I think it could be the opposite of embracing equal rights. It could be sort of caricature of the, you know, like just saying, oh, look how disgusting these people are. Look how, you know.
There's a certain kind of homophobe who would never go to Rocky Horror Picture Show. That much I can guarantee. That's not true.
That's not true. You definitely would have homophobes who are like, you know, like that would go to Rocky Horror because it's this whole midnight wild party,
I suppose
you know, cult thing. It's nothing to do with.
That's a good point. But those same, and it's also true. Those same people.
People go to Rocky just to get laid.
Yeah, I guess so. Because girls are going to go there. I mean, you know, and what's funny is this one has become so mainstream and so accepted that you might go to Rocky Horror and enjoy it, and then at the same time really object to a kissing scene because your college is also putting on Rent, you know,
right.
And so that'll happen. And I don't know. That's very interesting.
But also, this movie treats the sexually perverted people as bad guys, you know, and so I mean,
yes.
You know, you don't have to like them to think that.
Well, and there have been plenty of gay writers who said, you know, don't do me any favors with the parades and you know, a lot of this sort of stuff, a lot of these details have only served to alienate, you know, real people with real political issues from
because they're not
community.
Because I can continue to believe that the gay community is not like me. They're not part of my life. They're just those guys over there that dress funny.
Oh,
you know.
It's important to note that you know, the people, you know, it's not like just the kinky sex that, and Frank is bi, he's not gay, but I mean the kinky sex that is going on here, you know, that's not necessarily what makes him a bad guy. What makes him a bad guy is that he's
a killer.
He's murderous, and he's also a cannibal.
Yes, yes. Frank is we should get right to that. So Frank is a bad dude. Okay, we met the crew. So we've met basically everyone until we come to the first victim. What we find out about Frank, because we do the time warp, Frank comes on and he sings his song all about himself, which we talked about a little bit already, where he describes himself as a sweet transvestite. And, you know, he describes himself...
And by the way, transsexual Transylvania is a planet, is a city and a planet.
Yes.
Or a planet. Or, I'm sorry, a planet in a galaxy. I think it is. So it's not a town. It's not Transylvania, the country, and it's not supposed to mean that everybody's there is transsexual. It's actually the planet transsexual from the galaxy Transylvania, I think.
Yes.
Something like that. Yeah.
I'm glad you clarified that because yes, he's not. And I know that sounded sarcastic, but it totally wasn't. It is worth making a note of that Frank is hinting to us, and we don't understand it yet, that he's from another place, and none of this is really going to equate to human behavior. But he introduces himself in his really awesome opening number, where he does all the vamping that we talked about earlier, and then his performance, where he gets all this adulation, and that's the thing that he loves the most, is interrupted by the arrival of a rock and roll star. And that rock and roll star is Meatloaf as Eddie, and this is Drew's favorite character. He just bursts out of a wall in ways that I don't completely understand. Tell me, Drew, what's your thing with Eddie? What's the deal?
Well, first of all, when I was a teenager and I was, kind of getting into punk rock and rockabilly and, what eventually mutates into psychobilly. Like, Eddie kind of epitomizes that. He's got this crazy leopard print leather jacket, and he bursts out, and he's got of this ice block on a motorcycle, and he is literally the only character in the entire film that upstages Frank. Like, when he is on screen, this is the coolest Meatloaf has ever been. Like, I don't think Meatloaf is often, like, people usually use Meatloaf. He's got some good songs, but he's often kind of the butt of a lot of jokes. Well, Meatloaf is very, very cool as Eddie, and he looks cool. The song is great, and he's got such attitude. Like, even when he's doing the sax solo, I love the fact that they have that close up where he literally just kicks the camera for 1 second, and that is why he had to die, because he upstages Frank.
He completely, yeah. And Magenta is Columbia is totally in love with him. I've never dissed Meatloaf. I love Meatloaf. At the same time I was listening to a lot of Rocky, I was probably listening to Battle to Hell just as much.
Right, but to be fair, you also like Brad and Steely Dan, so there's that.
I don't even understand what that's.
Can you at least give me that Meatloaf left to his own devices is not this punk rock?
Right.
No, that's true. That's absolutely right. Meatloaf had, Meatloaf has a sensibility that is. He still loves his frilly shirts and the handkerchiefs and the Jim Steinman songs. So you're right. He is Celine Dion in a male body with a motorcycle. That's true. But I don't know where the random diss of Steely Dan comes from. It's going to let that lay there. David Gates and Brad was a very cool band.
Go ahead. That Jason is a bit of a Brad Majors.
What? What'd you say?
I am not Brad Majors.
Oh, Brad Majors. Yes, a little bit Brad Majors-y.
It may well be. All right. So I actually love Brad's line where he goes, "Say, do any of you know how to Madison?" I love just how appalling he is. He's a Hardy Boy, essentially. So we introduce Eddie, and he comes busting out of the wall. I think he's in there because part of his brain has been removed to work on the monster that Frank has been working on. Because Frank hints that he's working on a monster, or he's making a man, so to speak. Yeah. And no, he actually does the line. He hasn't done the number yet, but he's mentioned that he's working on something. So. Eddie comes out. He's got a scar on his forehead. I think he's been in the freezer. So he's busted out. He does his performance. Columbia loves him. And Frank has had enough of Eddie taking the spotlight from him. So Frank attacks Eddie with an ice pick. It's amazing how quickly this show moves along, right?
Off screen.
Right.
He attacks him off screen. He goes into the freezer after him, and then you see, blood everywhere as he comes out.
Well, that's right. In the same manner that this movie has essentially no nudity, none, zero. It also, other than the statues, there's also very little blood. Considering that there's some violence here. It's a very, very, the movie is actually quite tame, except for all of the content that is not actually on the screen. That's what makes it one of the most complicated adult pictures around, because it's not pornographic in any sense, and it doesn't have graphic violence. But yeah, he attacks Eddie with this ice chunking tool, and that's the end of Eddie. And that's when they go to I think that's the point where they go and bring the monster to life. And we meet the monster, and the monster is the eponymous Rocky. He's Rocky. Rocky is a hunky, blonde, muscular model.
Adonis.
Yes, he is. He's an Adonis. He has a perfect body. Interestingly enough, he's not built like Mr. Universe or anything. He's built kind of like Tarzan. He's an extremely, elongated, very athletic, muscular, creature. And, so Rocky sings the song, "In Just 7 Days I Can Make You a Man," which is a reference to the comic book ads that Richard O'Brien would have seen in the back of all the comics he was reading as a kid, where Charles Atlas would sell his exercise regimes, and it was in 7 days you can get results. In just 7 days I can make you a man.
I will say that a lot of the stuff that audience participation, at least in my day, did, and I don't know if it's gotten more PC since then, was actually pretty horribly offensive. Like when I think about it now, I'm like, well, that was, because for that one we would say, "In just 7 days," and then everybody would go, "In 7 nights I can make you," everybody would go, "A fag just like your dad." Now I'm like, I don't think I would want to say that now.
Yeah. It's funny. You listen to it now and you go, "Holy God!" Would you sing that today? Do they still sing that? I have no idea. I don't know. And yeah, so a lot of the audience participation stuff is sort of either blatantly homophobic or teasingly homophobic. One or the other. It's homophobic, and I don't know.
Offensive in other ways too, not just. They're just offensive all throughout,
Oh yeah, there's all kinds of like scatological stuff and all kinds of but that using that word is a tough one. I don't know if I would do that in 2013. That's a tough one. Maybe I'm wrong. I got to go to the audience for this. I have no idea. So we create this beautiful, as Jamie calls him, this blonde Adonis, this man, and he comes to life. And what I can't remember is, how do we get from there to Janet sleeping with Rocky? I feel like I'm missing something here. Because,
you're missing the fact that Frank is going around messing around with both. He tricks.
That's what happens next.
Brad.
Okay, yeah, they bring the monster to life and they all go to bed. And it's like, okay, so that's in other words,
with each other.
Right, with each.
No,
right.
They don't go to bed with each other. They go to bed separately.
Right.
And Frank goes in first to Janet and to Brad.
Right. So Frank comes in and seduces each of the newlyweds by pretending to be the other, and it is and that's a really raunchy scene, and it's really cool. It's well done, and so yeah, we do see Frank avidly in silhouette, by the way, once again, because this is all told a pretty clean picture. He sort of avidly seduces each of them, and that's funny. And then somehow or another, I think that what happens is Riff, who is angry about the creature for reasons that are unclear, winds up causing the creature to run away. So the creature is running around and winds up in the arms of Janet, who has been sexually awakened by her experience with Frank. And so Janet sings Touch Me because, first of all, she's been sexually awakened. Second, she spies on a closed-circuit TV that Brad has been sleeping with Frank, and so she sleeps with the monster. And, my God. So at this point, we start to slowly make our way around to a lot of plot. And I don't want to, work my way through every bit of it, but basically now we've set up all of the all the conflict that there's going to be. We established that Riff has a major problem with Frank, and where we eventually get to, Riff has just had enough. Frank is off on his own. He's making monsters. He's doing all kinds of things, and Riff decides that he's going to reveal to us the reality of the plot, which is somehow. I almost hesitate to say this out loud. They are aliens from outer space. Riff and Magenta and Frank are three aliens who have come to Earth to do Lord knows what, and they're going to take Frank back to the planet. And so the end of the movie, and we'll go back for a second to the floor show, but the end of the movie is basically all about Riff seizing control back from Frankenfurter, who's gone way out of control. So the second half of the movie is all about...
Riff Raff and Magenta, we are to believe Riff Raff and Magenta are the moderate
right.
of this culture, somehow.
Right, and they're... which is wonderfully crazy. Yeah, but it totally is about, Riff says, I'm your new commander, it's time for us to leave. I really like that he's like, no, I've had enough of your crazy shit.
And then Frank says, I'm going home, but
yes.
then they make it clear to him that, oh wait, no, actually you won't be going anywhere. We're going to kill you now.
Right.
With our awesome ray gun that we
yes.
have. Oh, by the way, I'm not a hunchback after all. I'm standing up perfectly straight now that I have my cool alien costume on.
Yes. Well, and and Richard O'Brien also gets to sing more at the end there. There is this the one thing that we miss as I ran over that there is the floor show, because at one point Frank manages to capture all of the heroes, and including. We don't even have time to get into Dr. Scott, the scientist who comes, who's been researching.
You mean
Frank.
Dr. Vaughn?
Dr. Von Scott.
Great
that really
Scott.
doesn't matter.
Yet another cast. Well, he's yet another cast member from the London stage.
And did you talk about Eating Eddie? I don't remember if you talked about that.
No. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. Yes, they ate Eddie. Frank, at some point in all of this, forgive me, but at some point before they all seduce one another, Frank proves once and for all that he's not going to be, he's a nasty piece of work. He doesn't want anybody else to get attention besides him, and so to get his revenge, he has chopped up Eddie and cooked a bunch of them and served it to the rest of them, and it's a pretty grotesque scene, and the
sensitive subject.
Yes, a tender subject. Yes, and that's well done. He reveals it with a really bit of horror movie flourish, where he pulls away the tablecloth and reveals.
Well, he reveals it with a comment about I can't remember what.
They all get the comment about the tender subject.
and then again with the audience participation, as they show each person, every audience goes, Brad gets it, Janet gets it, Columbia gets it, or whatever, and they're like, Rocky doesn't get it because Rocky's kind of like eating.
Yes.
It's really funny.
But and that's when if we've. Unfortunately, we can never completely turn against Frank because he's still the most interesting person on the screen. But we know that he's very, very bad. He's a bad dude. He's extremely jealous, and and he killed Meatloaf and served him up. So that is something that must be punished. But he first manages to get the upper hand on everybody. He freezes them all. turns them into statues, dresses them up in drag, puts them on a stage, and then makes them dance a floor show when he brings them back. And the floor show, which I'm trying to remember the name of the song. Anyway, the floor show is when all the characters reveal that they have been, what's called floor show, they've been tainted by their experience with Frank and Furter. And that's when finally Riff goes, no, we're done. I'm shutting you down. We're getting in our rocket ship and we're going home. The rocket ship is actually almost the entire castle. I want to wrap this up so we can
dream it, be it.
Yes. Oh yeah. No. There's this whole period where they give Frank time to do an aria where he sings an entire bit about his.
Which I do love that song too.
No. Don't Dream It, Be It is
that's a great one.
That's actually that's what's kind of complicated here, because Don't Dream It, Be It is the kind of the slogan, the unofficial slogan of the show, and yet Frank has been it to the point of going too far and needs to be reeled back in. But you're right, he's our guide when he says, don't just dream about the things you want to do, actually do them. Don't dream it, be it. And that's wonderful. I really do love that. So it's complicated because he's also the one who's way the most out of control. He's a prophet in a sense.
Well, he is a wonderfully 1970s character in that way.
Yeah.
I mean, I would argue that the character almost epitomizes the 1970s. He's in a way the death of glam rock and the birth of punk rock.
Wow. Well said. You should write that into an essay. Honestly, that would be really that is really cool. Yes. No, I agree. And you're right. Glam rock dies when Freddie gets shot in his whole Joan Collins outfit, and they all take off. Basically, the aliens.
You mean Frankie? I mean Frank?
Riff?
I was like Freddie. Freddie.
I think you were thinking about Freddie Mercury.
Freddie Mercury, yeah.
Riff and Magenta take off in their rocket ship, and they leave our heroes behind to get sort of scorched, although not necessarily killed or even close to killed by the rocket as it's taking off, because they're left sort of crawling in the earth like worms. And what's really great is that we close on these lines from Superheroes, the final song, where it says, "And crawling upon the planet's face, some insects called the human race," and we see them crawling, and they are insect-like in the way that they are left behind, sort of stunned by the experience they've had and the aliens leaving, and leaving them in the wake of this rocket ship. That final song is just outstanding, and I always regret that it's essentially cut out of the movie.
Well, what
are you talking about?
The full song is in the English one, and for some reason it's only part of it's in the American one, and I think that's strange.
But there's at least a few lines of it doesn't. I think that the criminologist reads at least the couplet, "Crawling upon the planet's face." We just don't get to we don't get to hear the whole thing, and it's just as well. I think the studio thought that Superheroes was just a downer, to actually come out and, because it's a whole song. Jamie, it's a groovy song. You would dig it. You should go get the cast recording and hear it, because it's all about. But it's a downer song. It's a weird one to end on. So instead, they just give us a couple of lines from it recited by the criminologist, and we're out. And it's funny that we don't end on like some kind of overture or something. I think we do reprise science fiction double feature, so that makes sense. So that we've spent a long time talking about this. We should come around and talk about our final thoughts about Rocky Horror Picture Show, because I know that I've missed a million things, and that you guys.
Favorite song.
Yeah. Okay, let's do this. Let's go around, and instead of regular final thoughts, give me your favorite song and then of course anything else that you want to throw in there. And we can go. Let's switch it up. Let's go Jamie, Drew, Julia, and then I'll go. Favorite song and final thoughts. Jamie.
Oh, let's see. I like Rocky Horror's little, farewell song. Not Rocky Horror, Dr. Frank Furter song. But I think I have to probably go with "There's a Light at the Frankenstein House."
Yes,
that's been,
Frankenstein Place.
I just think it's such a pretty song, and it's so dark and fortuitous. I don't know. I think that's my favorite. So.
Any final thoughts?
But I recommend. So it depends on. I guess. It's a movie that's not for everybody, but I feel like everybody should see it at some point.
Yes. All right. Drew, favorite song and final thoughts.
My favorite song is, as previously mentioned, Whatever Happened to Saturday Night, otherwise known as Papa Tootie, Bless My Soul. I think it's a really catchy song. Meatloaf sings it incredibly well. It's a style of music I really enjoy, and it's definitely in a movie with a lot of really interesting scenes. It's definitely a high point in the movie. Final thoughts. I will echo my better half here. It may not be for everybody, but everybody should see it at least once. I don't think you need to see it in the theater to appreciate it. I think the theater experience is something different, but you can get a different kind of enjoyment out of it and on home video too, and I would recommend seeing it in both ways for a full appreciation of this particular part of popular culture.
Julia, what about you? Favorite song and final thoughts?
My favorite song is probably Time Warp. I just think it's so much fun, and I love that there's dancing to it. Since I like dancing and singing, so for me, it's got the best of both worlds. And final thoughts are that Jamie needs to go watch it in the theater.
Hey, we got to take her. Maybe if she comes to town, we could all go see Rocky. Are you kidding me? That would be great. I would
really
love
fun
to do that. Yes.
That'd be cool.
All right.
It's a date.
For me, my favorite song is "There's a Light Over at the Frankenstein Place." That's I guess the song's called "Over at the Frankenstein Place," and I just love it. I love the pounding of it. I love the way the song builds. It's a beautiful piece. But I really like the soundtrack. So this is going to be one of my favorite musicals we're going to do. I think this is a movie that almost any adult can enjoy. I just can't imagine who wouldn't benefit from watching Rocky Horror Picture Show. It really, I think it's a cool one. When we started, I had this thought that I wondered if it was wrong to watch the movie in the theater when it wasn't the way you would experience the movie as originally conceived, because Richard O'Brien clearly didn't imagine all the experience. And as we've talked about it, I've realized that that's an antiquated way of looking at it for me, because the experience is still going on, but it's been available on home video now for nearly 20 years. So people are as likely to have watched it on a DVD or on streaming video than in the live experience, and it possibly may be that most people are going to be watching it the old-fashioned way, just popping it in and watching the whole movie, than seeing the live experience. So now I have to flip my concern and wonder, has that unique live experience been lost? And so, Jamie, maybe you should go do it before it disappears from the planet's face.
I don't
I
think
know they do it at the Alamo, too, down here in Austin. I'm not sure which one. I know one of them does it.
Right. Oh, no, it's always somewhere, but and Drew's saying, dream on, Jason. The live experience.
Yeah, I don't think there's any danger of Rocky Horror ever dying.
Maybe you're right. Okay, so by the way, next week we will be back with Phantom of the Paradise. That is the next movie in the musical
Mr.
horror
Tony.
retrospective. So yeah. So I'm very excited about that.
We gonna do endorsements?
Yeah, let's do the endorsements. Yes. So why don't you guys go? Because I need to consult my notes and remember what my endorsement was. So Jamie and then Drew.
Well, I just finished reading. Let's see. What was the name of the Redemption Song, The Ballad of Joe Strummer by Chris Salowich. Pretty good biography, very factual. Yeah, it was funny because it starts with the death of Joe Strummer, and of course ends with the death of Joe Strummer. But I was moved to tears by the end of it. I just felt like, oh, I lost a friend, even though, of course, I never knew Joe Strummer. But yeah, if you're in for a good read, it's a long read. It's like 600-something pages about Joe Strummer.
What was it called again?
So, it's actually a Redemption Song, The Ballad of Joe Strummer. So It's the definitive biography. It's pretty good.
Very cool. Drew, do you have any endorsements for us?
I do, actually. I've been sitting on this for a few weeks now, but I want to echo Tony's earlier endorsement of Dredd, which is the recent Judge Dredd movie. I am probably one of the few people that's actually a fan of the Stallone movie, even though I will acknowledge it's not very good and it's not a very good adaptation of the material. But I don't think I have ever quite seen an actor working so hard to be a two-dimensional drawing as Carl Urban is. Like, he really looks like a drawing of Judge Dredd. I mean, there's this perpetual scowl he has on his face, and if you are even vaguely familiar with the Judge Dredd comic books, it's the exact same scowl that the artists draw him with in every single Judge Dredd story. It's an odd comic book movie because...
Hello?
Oh, no. We lost Drew. It's an odd comic book movie, and then the powers of be did not want us to know. He'll come back, I'm sure.
He's still going.
Oh, no. Well, okay, all right.
That's funny.
All right, I
wow.
will...
wow, that's weird.
Oh, you're back. Good.
Where did you lose me?
An odd comic book drawing.
Yeah, it's an odd choice because...
Well, most comic book movies these days, they try to cram in as much of the mythology of the comic book that they possibly can. This could be one single issue of Judge Dredd. It's just a single issue of just a single story involving this character and like a day in his life in this sort of bizarre science fiction landscape. And even if you've never picked up a Judge Dredd comic book, if you just like violent action that is actually geared towards adults, this is a good one.
Very cool. All right. Let's see. What would I endorse? Do
I get to endorse something?
Oh no! Please do. That gives me another 30, 40 seconds to decide what I'm going to.
I just wanted to do a little self promotion. I've started a podcast, another podcast, with a high school friend of mine named Laura Mullane, and we are doing a podcast about being like just the good, the bad, and the ugly of being parents. And it's called Pod Moms. And so if you are a parent or want to know about what it's like to be a parent, and you just want to listen to some people talk about their challenges and successes and observations, then please join us. You can either find us on Facebook or on iTunes by searching Pod Moms. That is
very
all.
Cool. I'm glad you brought that up because I'm very excited about Pod Moms. I really am. So Julia is the only one among us now who's going to be doing 2 podcasts a week. That's amazing. All right. The only thing that I want to endorse right away. I've really gotten into watching a lot of movies on streaming, just like leaving them running as I work. And I may have mentioned this before, but if you have Netflix, I totally recommend that I have two streaming thoughts. One is go watch Dark Shadows, because watching Dark Shadows will put you in the mind of a totally different universe where, after a while, if you just let hour after hour after hour of Dark Shadows play, the wobbling of the sets, the sort of echoing of the sound stage, it all becomes less like a stage and like a low-budget soap opera, and more like just another weird universe where that's how these people's world is, and it's very cool. I only discovered Dark Shadows in the last couple of years, and I have gone, utterly bonkers over it. So that's one. The other is, if you are a fan of MST3K, Mystery Science Theater 3000, Hulu.com now has a whole bunch of really awesome riff tracks, which is the same guys, just under a new name, riff tracks versions of some awesome horror movies, including The House on Haunted Hill and Plan 9 from Outer Space. So you should hie thee hither over to Hulu.com and check out Plan 9 from Outer Space and House of Haunted Hill, because they are funny as heck in the hands of the MST3K team. And that's it for me. We'll be back next week, continuing the musical horror retrospective. I am so thrilled everybody had the patience to come back and get Rocky Horror going. I'm so glad that we're back on track. You guys were wonderful, and please listen to us, subscribe to us on Facebook, leave comments, leave suggestions, anything you want. We will always listen and always respond. Thank you, guys. We will talk to you soon.
Thanks. Night.
Have a great night.
Night.
Night.